Hey everyone, good to see you. It's a Friday night in the Big Ten, and we are revved up for another Big Ten live show. We've done this 53 times, mostly on Monday night. We have since moved the last 5 or 6 weeks to Friday night with the big call-in show. However, unfortunately tonight, Tim Prangley won't be here. Therefore, with Tim goes our call-in system in regards to the call in traditional style. So unfortunately, Tim not here tonight. Therefore, we do not have the call-in line for those of you who'd like to call in on the phone, but we've got StreamYard cranked up and ready to go. The StreamYard link is in the chat. It's also in the description section of the video to talk Big Ten football. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. I hope you are as well. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. Consider all those good things that you need to do to keep us alive and well here at the Voice of College Football. Please like the video. You know you will. You know you're going to like it, so you might as well like it. So smash the button and tell your friends. Plenty of time to get them in here to talk college football. And I get it. It's March Madness. I get it that the Big Ten tournament is going on in Minneapolis and somebody's on the court right now. I don't know who. I know that we did our Buckeyes Live show with Steve Hellwagon from Minneapolis, and he was getting ready to watch like Michigan State and Minnesota. Ohio State defeated Iowa later that day. Those are my Big Ten basketball notes as of right now. I have never attended or covered a Big Ten basketball tournament. I covered, let's see, 1994, 95, 96, I believe 97. I forget which ones I may have missed, but pretty much all the SEC basketball tournaments from 1994 through 2000 through 2000. That was the last one I did. That's been a long time ago now. When I say 2000, it doesn't seem like that long ago. 24 years. That was the last time I covered an SEC basketball tournament. Wow. All right. So, of course, the news earlier today, for those of you who were with us and are informed about the big news concerning the college football playoff, we will certainly answer your comments and questions. Want to take your take on it, your perspective, and I am certainly available to give you mine. However, we did cover the ground pretty well top to bottom earlier. So I don't want to go too deep into that, depending on, hey, you produce the show ultimately, so we respond to you and what you want us to deliver. The main talking points here, basically, it's not so much about the format. It's not so much about the format because we knew the format. 12 teams for 2024 and 25. And now suddenly we got a 14-team probability starting in 2026. So there is no way that there was all this to do about a revamped format in 2026 without going to 14 teams. It says right now there is strong preference. There is strong preference, which means the Big Ten and the SEC want it. And so it's going to happen. 14 teams in 2026. I would be surprised if that does not occur. So what you need to know about the football you're going to watch for the next 2 years, 12 teams, 4 conference champions. They get the 4 byes. We got the top group of 5 champion, and then the rankings from the College Football Playoff Committee select the rest of it, including the conference champion from the group of 5. That's for the next 2 years. So Big 12 take advantage. ACC take advantage because you get a bye for the next 2 years. I'm not saying that it's impossible that the Big 12 and the ACC will receive byes going forward in the 14-team model, but it's unlikely. There is a reason the Big 10's been the most outspoken, but the SEC's got to be right there in demanding the 14-team field. All the FBS conference commissioners signed off, and you got a 58% share going to the SEC and the Big 10. You've got a 32% share going to the ACC and the Big 12. You've got the other 10% going to Notre Dame and the group of 5 conferences. I would love, 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 love to know, even though this is not the emphasis of what's going on here, I would love to know that group of five split, because it's based on field performance, and it might be also based on TV ratings. Although when you're weighing 83,000 watched the Rice Tulane game versus 77,000 watched the Navy Louisiana game. I know Navy and Louisiana never play, but something like that. I think that it's more about on-field performance. So a little bit more money gets kicked to the group of five conferences and teams that are successful. So again, we went live at 2 p.m. Eastern time and broke it down. Great discussion. Loved it. Great calls. Great conversation there. 14 teams. This is the Big Ten and the SEC getting its way. They rule the sport. They are determining this. Somebody made the comment during our earlier live stream about this is what the College Football Playoff Selection Committee has decided. No, that's not what they've decided. This is what the Big Ten and the SEC have decided. It's still mostly invitational. 14 teams, 10 are selected by the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings. 4 conference champions. And then we've got the 5 conference champions. So the other 9 slots, but the 1 conference champion selected by the playoff rankings. All right. So again, much to talk about there. If you missed it earlier today, please check out the live stream. But again, we can talk about it here as well. And I wanted to go through week 1 in the Big Ten. We do have a possibility of some folks dropping by to drop some knowledge on Big Ten teams. Of course, spring practice is underway. A lot of teams took this week off. This happens quite a bit where they start spring practice, they go for a week, they take a week off, then they come back and finish out. We've got content coming soon from Ohio State. So we've got our Buckeyes show typically on Wednesday. So check that out. 11 a.m. Eastern time every Wednesday with Steve Hellwagon, Kevin Noon, and Tony Gerdeman. Then we sometimes have to go later in the week like we did this week on Thursday. But I sat down with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts today, went through all the offensive positions for the Buckeyes. So be looking out for those videos on the Ohio State channel. I got to come up with a better name than this. You know what's going to happen, though? I'm not going to come up with a better name than this because I don't come up with good names for anything except children. But names for events or random events or titles for this and that. The titles of my videos aren't even good. So anyway, we can do better than helmet off. I was thinking bake off, helmet off. Help me out here. Leave your suggestions in the chat. What we're going to do is we're going to run through all the helmets in college football, or in tournament style, in bracket style, not in March, not this month. We'll do it in May. We're going to be focused in April on spring football, then the transfer portal, of course, once that opens up. And we released our first batch of coaches rankings. That's out there. Take a look. So there are 69 coaches in the Power 5. So we separate. I did this starting a couple of years ago. I just figured it's basically impossible, nearly impossible, to evaluate group of 5 coaches versus Power 5 coaches. Just is. And yes, I'm probably going to continue to say Power 5 coaches until I stop saying it. So we separate out the group of 5. We will do group of 5 coaches rankings as well. But we are focused right now on the Power 5. Delivered our number 69 up to number 51. The next batch is coming 50 through up to 26. Then we'll do the top 25. That actually makes sense. We will do that. So check out the coaches rankings. Directly following what we do tonight, we've got the USC call-in show with Tim Prangley, Matt Zemek, on the USC channel. I want to look at week 1. And again, we might have some folks stopping by to break down their teams as we give you an update on spring practice. We have a number of exciting things headed your way at the Voice of College Football coming up soon. The helmet month, just one of many. Just one of many. Oh, what do we got? Brian's here. Dave's here. The Michigan Helmet Invitational. That's a bit awkward. It's a bit much there, Dave. Not going to go with that one. Battle of the Brain Buckets. Okay. We can do better, although I won't. Moose, Michigan is the best helmet. There is no competition. That's a shocker coming from Moose. Shocker. I like the helmet competition too, and I can't take credit for it. That's a Joey Foster brain child to say, let's do a helmet competition, bracket style. Now, I'm probably going to take a little flack for who gets matched up against whom. Probably take a backlash on that. In the chat. Anything else out here? Okay. If not, we go to week 1. And again, give us a call, college football playoff and coaches rankings. Check those out. Let me know what you think. Week 1. I have no idea who's playing in week 1 off the top of my head. I've completely forgotten. But we will see what we've got. Week 1 in the Big Ten starts on Thursday night, August 29th, as it always does. Of course, last year we had a Minnesota matchup against Nebraska that went down to the last field goal, the last second. North Carolina, Minnesota. The two got together in Chapel Hill last year. Ethan Kalkumanis was the Minnesota quarterback. He's gone. He went to Rutgers. Of course, Drake May is showing off for NFL scouts these days. He's gone. And we've got the new quarterback for North Carolina, most likely is going to be Max Johnson, former Texas A&M and LSU signal caller. North Carolina, Minnesota, that looks like a Fox game to me on a Thursday night. On Saturday, Curt Cignetti. Check out our coaches' rankings. We've talked about Curt Cignetti. 11-1 at James Madison last year. 52-9 at JMU. Did a remarkable job. Guided the program, the transition to FBS football. Almost went undefeated last year. And did a remarkable job. Now he takes over for the fired Tom Allen. Indiana hosting FIU. Don't necessarily mark it down as a dub for IU immediately. Illinois State at Iowa. Yes, Iowa's not going to win by as much as they should, but be sure they will win. Connecticut's taking on Maryland. We get the Fighting Jim Moras taking on Mike Loxley and company. Billy Edwards at quarterback for Maryland most likely will win that job. Fresno State at Michigan. Bulldogs could be a little pesky in this one, could put up a fight. Fresno State and company, the Bulldogs with one of the better Mountain West clubs at Michigan. Florida Atlantic, they gave Illinois a fight last year in Champaign. Now they go to Michigan State. UTEP and Nebraska, Yawner, Akron at Ohio State, bigger, yawn. The Fighting Zips at Ohio State. Of course, the drama there is going to be more surrounding what does Will Howard look like if he, in fact, wins the job as we all expect. And if he doesn't, then we got a story. We're going to have a lot to talk about. And again, we've got positional previews for Ohio State coming up with Pat Murphy of Bucknuts. Idaho at Oregon. Can Oregon put up 81 like they did last year against whoever that was? Penn State at West Virginia. Of course, the Nittany Lions won the matchup in Happy Valley, but they've got to go to Morgantown. Let's not brush this one aside. Neil Brown, comeback season, a season he had to have to secure his spot on the sidelines at West Virginia after 2 losing seasons. 9-4 for the Mountaineers. They went 6-3 in the Big 12. Penn State won that game. I believe the final score was 38-15, but they scored a touchdown with like 10 seconds left. It was a pretty hard-fought game. It was a one-score game in the second half. Penn State at West Virginia. Look out, James Franklin. Howard at Rutgers. Rutgers always plays some of the bottom of the barrel FCS type teams. Anyway, Rutgers, yes, they'll get their win. UCLA at Hawaii. Weber State at Washington. Just a completely different look at Washington. Jed Fish in for Kalen DeBoer. Michael Penix out. Will Rogers in. Offensive line gone. The Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. Michigan fans don't laugh. They did technically win it. Maybe they shouldn't have, but still a good offensive line. And I think all the starters are gone off the offensive line. Rome Odunze and McMillan at wide receiver, gone. Western Michigan, Wisconsin. Luke Fickell, a bit of a disappointing debut season in Madison. 7-6. Probably should have won the bowl game. Had 2 touchdown leads twice, including in the fourth quarter. Get their start at home against Western Michigan. Indiana State at Purdue. Miami at Northwestern. Northwestern almost always loses to somebody in the MAC. They have more losses to teams in the MAC than everybody else in the Big Ten combined. I am fairly confident about that. I would think, and I guess this isn't the case because we see Thursday game in Minneapolis, and then we see this glut of Saturday games, and then we see a Sunday game we'll get to in just a second. So I guess no Friday games in the Big Ten. That is unusual. Oh, and that little affair on Sunday in Vegas, LSU, USC. Can the voice of college football get to that game? Can the voice of college football, can we get to that game, folks? Some things would need to happen, but we never give up hope. We talked about that actually here with our brain trust at the voice of college football sometime last season when looking at this season and possible moves to make to get out there and tell you. And when I say get out there, get the platform out there to different sites, but that would be a good one right there. USC and LSU. And that is one of those games that the loser gets questioned by the fan base, especially if it's Lincoln Riley and USC. I think Brian Kelly has gained a bit of trust. Of course, he won the division 2 years ago. This last year's team was 10-3. I don't know. I expect better defense to be played, but the easy analysis here is that it's going to be 50-48 because these were two atrocious defenses last year. Atrocious defenses. LSU had one of the great defensive players in college football in Harold Perkins and did not know what to do with him. I guess Davis looking to go to a game this year. That's how I read that. Moose thinks that LSU is going to take care of business against USC traveling across the country. Well, Baton Rouge to Vegas, not quite across the country. A. Schraub would really like to make that Texas game at the big house and need some how to get the money together and get a ticket. What are we looking at? Ricardo is asking about the Aaron Donald retirement, which I knew nothing about, so I have no reaction right now. This is my reaction. You were watching it in real time. Aaron Donald, as an NFL player, has been so incredibly good that he's been mentioned, and not by people that don't know what they're talking about, mentioned by experts, scouts, as arguably the best player, not the best defensive tackle in the NFL, not the best defensive player. No, the best player in the NFL. I have drifted away from the NFL. Some of you know that. I've drifted away from the NFL, but I have been as ardent an NFL guy through most of my life as anyone you will come across. And rarely has a defensive player been talked about as being the best player in the game. Lawrence Taylor, he certainly had his run where, and he's the best example in my lifetime of a guy that was just so incredibly dominant, could just take over a game like nobody I've ever seen on that side of the ball. Ray Lewis at times was given that kind of credit as possibly the greatest player overall. But Aaron Donald, every time I turned on a Sunday night game, Monday night game, he was being talked about in that light, and he would show why. So there's my response. You saw it in real time. Okay, we're going to stick to, even though I love this matchup, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, it reminds me of the early 90s Cotton Bowl matchups. They played 2 consecutive years. Notre Dame won the first game big, held on for the second one. 24-21, correct? Yes, I think Notre Dame won the first game like 24-3. Brian asking, Mark, is Julian Fleming a 1,000-yard receiver at Penn State? If I had to bet, I would say no. And the first reason would be because of injuries. If he gets hurt, of course, he's not going to reach that figure. And if he gets hurt even for a couple games, that substantially reduces his chances. So that's the first factor. If we're talking about strictly a betting odds target, the next thing would be Penn State is going to continue to baby Drew Aller until he proves otherwise. They've got 2 excellent backs in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, and Julian Fleming should be the guy. He should be the guy in this offense. He did have a nice season 2 years ago at Ohio State. I think 33 catches, 6 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. He's going to have to go for. He's not going to average 20 yards a catch catching the ball from Drew Aller. So he's going to have to catch 70 passes. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I wouldn't be shocked. Most is going Akron 45, Ohio State 17. I think there's something behind that. Yes, Dave, I like Penn State and West Virginia. Brian, yes, Fresno State certainly is going to be at least 32 points better than Michigan. There is no doubt. LFG is like number 10. So what's he telling all of us? Hit the like button. Thanks, LFG. Appreciate that. I know you're trolling, Moose. I saw that. I saw it. LSU and USC. Shoot, unless we've got anything else to hit on, we might as well go to week 2. Back to week 1. If I could only watch one game. They went to the national schedule. If I could only watch one game, week 1, obviously I'm going to watch USC and LSU. If I could watch a second game, I'm going to watch Penn State and West Virginia. However, part of me would want to watch Minnesota, North Carolina instead. On to week 2. Big 10 games. Texas, Michigan. Ton of eyes going to be on Michigan's quarterback situation in week 1 to see who's ready, who's prepared, who gets the call, who gets the start. I would expect, I was going to say Jim Harbaugh, Sharon Moore to name the starting quarterback with 2 to 3 weeks left in camp. 2 weeks in that range. Unless somebody is just so significantly better, that's not going to be decided for a number of reasons, not all related to just strictly football evaluation. That's not going to be determined and announced in the spring. Keep in mind, folks, we will be here on Saturday afternoon, Saturday nights, depending on the schedule of games during the month of April for spring football. Kansas at Illinois. That was one of the more ugly efforts by the Illini last year. Kansas ran them off the field. I know the final score was only an 11-point win. It wasn't close. So now the Jayhawks go to Champaign. A lot of people love Kansas as a dark horse. That would be a dark horse pick in the Big 12. Lance Leipold doing a heck of a job. And of course, they've got their starting quarterback, Jalen Daniels, back. Western Illinois at Indiana. Yuck. Iowa State at Iowa, one of my faves. One of my faves. Michigan State at Maryland. We do get a Big 10 game in week 2. Rhode Island. I've got a certain soft spot in my heart for Rhode Island. The Roadies. I won't go into that right now, but a certain soft spot in my heart for the Rams of Rhode Island at Minnesota. Ooh, Colorado, Nebraska in Lincoln. Colorado embarrassed Nebraska last. Well, they embarrassed Jeff Sims, or Jeff Sims embarrassed himself. But yes, Colorado ran Nebraska off the field in the second half by 22 in Boulder. Colorado has now won 3 games in this series, beginning with Scott Frost's first year. And in all 3 games, in the first 2 games, they had comeback wins. Western Michigan at Ohio State. I'm going to take off and defend the Buckeyes. I know you guys are shocked by this, but I saw this earlier today where somebody was pouncing on the Buckeyes for a pathetic, ridiculous Just uninspiring non-conference schedule. And I get it. If you don't know the backstory and you see who Ohio State plays in non-conference play, especially if you're a Michigan fan, then you're going to jump all over the Buckeyes for playing no one. But what is the comparison here? What is the reality? The reality is that Michigan was playing UCLA, had signed a home and home. Yes, a home and home, UCLA, Michigan. Michigan canceled. There was really no reason to cancel. In this instance, Ohio State was to play Washington home and home. What happened there? I think we know. Ohio State couldn't keep that series intact, right? Right. Okay. D-Rock Irish, you got it. Thank you for noticing. Michigan State, Maryland. Will Jonathan Smith bring his magic to East Lansing? He did a hell of a job at Oregon State. Remarkable what he did there. Remarkable. Brings Aiden Childs, Aiden Childs with him, who has next to no experience. Mop-up duty last year, but people rave about him and how good he will be. Boise State at Oregon. Boise State is no longer the darlings of college football, no longer the great winning percentage program that they were, but they still won the Mountain West last year. They go to Oregon. Bowling Green at Penn State. Akron at Rutgers. I really don't have a good handle on. When I saw the Bowling Green name there, I thought gave Michigan a game last year, but I really have no handle on who's coming back and all of that. We'll catch up with Phil Steele and get his magazine here in a couple months, which reminds me it's mid-March. It's going to be a couple months before we get Phil Steele on here. Utah State at USC. The Aggies are pesky. Eastern Michigan, Washington, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Duke, Northwestern. Duke and Northwestern play every year. Northwestern plays Duke more than they play just about anybody else in the Big Ten. They have played Duke, I believe, every year since 2015. So that's going to be 10 seasons, 9 games. They're brainiac schools, and they like to play each other. Fine. And Duke has embarrassed Northwestern by winning almost every game. Although, look at this matchup. Duke beat them in September when we knew about Mike Elko. We knew about Duke football. We knew what they had going there. We knew about Riley Leonard. We knew that Duke was a solid football team. Northwestern, we didn't know yet that we were witnessing the greatest turnaround in college football last year, the best story in college football in a number of ways. Jackson, you got one here, buddy. Boise State, Oregon. Perfect. Yes, Big Ten After Dark game. The Big Ten Network going to be burning the midnight oil and past the 2 a.m. oil. Well, maybe it's not. Yeah, it'll be that late, even in Chicago, Central Time. And even if they don't have a game on, they're going to have to stick around to finish out the late night game. But yeah, I like that one, Boise State and Oregon. That is the one in week 1. I don't know that we have one of those kind of games because, of course, LSU, USC, they're going to play in prime time. And then we've got the UCLA game against, let's see what we've got for week 1 for some late night fun. Idaho at Oregon, yawner. Oh, the ultimate late night affair, UCLA at Hawaii in week 1. Welcome, Big Ten, to late night football. Good call, Jackson. Moose letting us know that Michigan beat the SEC and the Pac-12 champs in the same year. An amazing accomplishment. It's never been done before. But yes, they did. Yes, they did. Oh, what the heck. Week 3. Let's get through the non-conference games. In week 3, Big Ten games, please. Oh, yeah. Alabama at Wisconsin. I have not checked to see if that's at Camp Randall or that's going to be a neutral site of sorts, Lambeau Field deal. Is that at Lambeau? Let's see here. Alabama, Wisconsin. I think they are playing at Camp Randall Stadium. Yes, they are. Tickets as low, according to ESPN.com, as low as $167. Go in the description section of the video, grab the Ticket Smarter link, use our promo code, get yourself $10 or $20 off. All right. Also in week 3, Central Michigan at Illinois. Look out for the Illini, meaning look out for a possible upset loss. Indiana is going to the Rose Bowl for the first time since 1967. My civics teacher played on that Indiana team that lost to USC in the Rose Bowl. We heard the stories. And now Indiana goes back out to the Rose Bowl because they will not be playing in the Rose Bowl game, but they play UCLA. 2 new head coaches right there, at least new to those schools and the Power 5, Deshaun Foster, UCLA, and Kurt Cignetti at Indiana. Troy at Iowa, not a cakewalk for Kirk Ferentz in Iowa. Maryland beat Virginia by 28 points last year. Virginia is a much improved football team. They were a serviceable 3-9, if there is such a thing. And there's not, but they got blown out a couple times. The rest of their schedule, they were competitive, except against Maryland. Arkansas State at Michigan, Prairie View A&M at Michigan State, Nevada at Minnesota. Northern Iowa is playing Nebraska. Oregon State. We've got the Civil War in week 3. Beautiful. I love it. And we also, this is something finally done by college football that makes sense, that is cool, that feels good, that love it. Civil War and Apple Cup, both week 3. So we maintain the rivalries. We almost get that feel of old Pac-12 football because they get played on the same weekend. So maybe we've got a 3:30 Eastern game between those two, and then we kick it to a primetime game with the other game. That's what I'm calling for right there. There are no other good games. Well, Alabama, Wisconsin, that's going to be Oh my goodness, that could be a big noon game. That could be a big noon game. Indiana UCLA strikes me as I don't know. The next choices though are obviously the priority has to go to Oregon, Oregon State, and Washington, Washington State. Apple Cup, Civil War. Those are going to be, yeah, I don't know what the networks are going to do with this schedule because you've got CBS in play, you've got NBC at night, you've got Fox at various times. So those three games are going to go somewhere in the 4 time slots of Fox, noon and 4 p.m. and NBC primetime, CBS 3:30 Eastern. I'm guessing Jackson has a prediction on that. Notre Dame at Purdue. When I see those two teams on the same line, that brings back a lot of memories of that series that used to be played all the time. So Jackson likes Ohio State and Oregon, NBC at night. Brian hates the big noon games. Shame on you, Brian. Brian says when the Irish join the Big Ten, they can reunite with a whole bunch of their rivals. Yes, they could. Just another good reason why Notre Dame should be in the Big Ten. I spouted off about that this afternoon, and it's going to lead me into a video because I want to get all my thoughts together at one time. And I'm not blaming Notre Dame. Not blaming Notre Dame. They need to be forced. Sometimes for the good of the individual, the good of that particular situation, sometimes you got to force it. Dave says, I am old enough to remember when they called Big Ten games before the SEC. Must be talking about CBS. Yes, I am that old as well. Before I get excited about all this football in the first 3 weeks of the season, because the non conference games, in terms of looking ahead, they interest me more because they're rarely played, because those teams rarely play, as opposed to looking at the conference schedule and you see a bunch of matchups that you see all the time, as opposed to, again, you see Texas and Michigan, you see Purdue and Notre Dame, and all of these teams thrown together, Minnesota and North Carolina. That I find interesting. But what I'm excited about, first and foremost, is going to be what we're going to present to you for the State of the Voice of College Football that's coming up. I should pick a date. Why don't we pick a date? Why don't we do this? It is March Madness. So many of you are going to be tied up watching hoops on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So we're going to look at maybe a Monday night, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday night for our State of the Voice of College Football. Can't wait for that. Position rankings are coming sometime late in spring practice, leading into the transfer portal season. coaches rankings. We released the first edition. Check those out. I think that was bad timing on my part. We were doing a live stream, but I released the coaches rankings. Usually that video does well. Nobody's watching it right now. So check out the coaches rankings, numbers 51 up to 69. We're going to release 26 through 50. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. This is the one way you can contribute financially to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. Grab the Amazon link. I promise you it will be transparent to you. And same shopping experience, doesn't cost you a penny. All of your Amazon account and all of the information in it stays intact. Check out our posts on the Tony Alford situation. I almost said Tony Elliott. I think I did, in fact, say that today because I've been looking at the coaches' rankings and looking at Tony Elliott, the Virginia coach, Tony Alford. It's quite the situation after 9 seasons with the Buckeyes, but they're not going to pay the man, and they don't think that highly of him anyway. This doesn't bother me one bit. The man has his career, his family in mind, so that's what he's going to do. He's going to do what's best for him and his family. We talk about loyalty. Loyalty runs both ways, or should to an extent. But when you're running a business or you're running your own personal career, then you do what's best for you. You still treat people with kindness and with respect, but you do what's best for you and yours. There's nothing wrong with that. Loyalty has a price tag. Bingo. Brian, we talked about this on the Buckeye Show this week. Michigan hired Alford so he could bring a playbook with him, had to replace Connor somehow. Well, I personally don't think that's going to be much of a factor, but it's worth an argument. It is a debate. Great content coming with Pat Murphy, Bucknuts. We went through the Ohio State offense. We went through the Clemson offense with Jason Priester, so check out those videos, and also the Clemson defense. We're doing position previews this month with spring practice going on here at the Voice of College Football. We have looked at Alabama, Arkansas, Ohio State. We're going to do Michigan. That's right. When are we doing Michigan? Michigan. I believe that's next Monday. Let's see here. Michigan position previews. Hopefully I didn't miss that today. I'm a bit lost here for a second. Let me look at my schedule. Yeah, sometime next week. Next Tuesday. Michigan position previews. All right, folks, you're quiet tonight. Do appreciate you being here. Move on to that. The USC shows coming up at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 Pacific, the USC call-in show. Check it out. Give it a look. Matt Zemek, Tim Prangley, they're the best. They know USC football. And get on over there. Again, the USC show starting in just about an hour and 6 minutes. Enjoy the basketball this weekend and throughout the month. We'll be here. We've got a ton. When I say this, what did Jim Harbaugh say at Big Ten Media Days when asked if Michigan was going to defeat Ohio State? This was, of course, prior to the first Michigan breakthrough in 2021. He was asked, are you going to beat Ohio State? And he said, yes, we are. Or we're going to die trying. So that is somewhat of our motto for 2024 here at the Voice of College Football. Are we going to succeed? We believe so. If not, we're going to die trying, and then we will, I don't know, do something else in 2025. All right. I was ready to head off into the sunset, but our guy JR's stopping by. Look at this. JR, what's going on?
Not much, Mark. How are you?
Oh, no, that's me. That's me. You're there. Good to hear from you.
Am I echoing?
Well, I didn't know because I didn't have the sound up, so I didn't hear anything. You were
Okay.
not.
All right. I'm still connecting my AirPods, but I'm good. I'm good. Popping in, saying hi to everybody. Glad to be here and glad to starting to do some stuff for the Voice of College Football over at Ohio State.
JR is posting content for us over on the Ohio State channel. Posted a look at the Tony Alford decision. Check it out. He went through Alford's performance, what he meant to recruiting, to position development, looked at obviously where the Buckeyes can go forward with this, what it possibly means with obviously the angle of it's Michigan. It's not just he took over took off for Arizona or something. So interesting stuff out of JR there. And you can catch JR on the Big Ten show as well, right here on YouTube.
Yep. The Big Ten Huddle is where I'm at more often than not. So head on over there. I know, I don't know if Michael's in the chat today, but Michael has gone over there, and Brian Myers down there. He's come over and checked out our stuff a time or two. So we appreciate your listeners coming on over and seeing what we're doing over there. It's a good time.
So the Buckeyes hit the practice field for a week. They're taking a week off. They're getting back out there next Monday. The spring game, I don't remember the exact date. It's around March 15th or 20th, something in that range. What do you think is important here in the next month?
Oh, I think the most important thing is figuring out what's going to happen with the running backs, not just with the coach, but also in spring practice and stuff like that. I know Chip Kelly is in charge of the quarterbacks, and that's where Ryan Day's kind of been. I've heard that Ryan Day is going to be working with the running backs a whole lot more than he has in the past, just with Tony Alford moving on. And I have my excitements about that. I also have my concerns as well. But at the end of the day, it's new territory, it's new stuff, and I just try to embrace it and see what comes next. So kind of a crazy move by Alford. I'm sure, I'm sure that in the locker room and stuff, those guys are dealing with that. A number of Ohio State players were tweeting like thumbs down. They didn't, they didn't know about it. I don't know if that meant they were surprised by where he was going or if they were surprised that he left. I don't know what that means, but just hoping that the locker room can stay maintained together. And whenever I watch the spring game, I just want to see the guys have fun. I want to see them have a good time. I want to see everybody get reps and, see that culture and that locker room is together and working out well.
JR, have you taken time to break down any tape on Will Howard?
I've watched a few of his games. I watched his Texas game. That was actually gonna be my next video that I do next week was some Will Howard and possibly Devin Brown type of stuff and kind of evaluating those two. I like Will Howard because of the running ability that he has, but not only that, but because I don't think that he's going to get hurt as easily as some other guys can. That's kind of been the thing with Devin Brown is every time he's had an opportunity, he's gotten hurt. He got hurt in the spring last year. It was kind of a crazy thing. The story was that he just threw the ball and his hand hit some other player's helmet and it like broke one of his fingers or something like that. I don't remember if it was broken, but something like that happened. And then obviously the Purdue game when he got hurt there and then the bowl game. And so, kind of a weird thing where, these aren't necessarily injuries that make you think the guy's injury prone, but it is kind of weird that every time he gets an opportunity, something happens and he can't get the opportunity.
My thought is that even if Will Howard on the surface shows no more ability than Kyle McCord, and when I say that, I understand they're different quarterbacks. Howard can run, escape. he looks to throw first. They did with him at Kansas State, as you well know, designed a lot of runs for him. And as we talked to Pat Murphy from Bucknuts today, that's not necessarily going to be the deal at Ohio State. But if for nothing else, he's got escapability and the option to run. He's not a sitting target in the pocket as much as McCord, number one. Number two, after 2.5 years of experience in the Big 12 versus McCord, now he's got the experience going to Syracuse. But at this time last year, to compare those two guys entering as the Ohio State quarterback, he better be more prepared with 2.5 years of experience versus McCord with 0.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, the other thing that I noticed in watching him is that not only, when you think about experience, you think about somebody who's going to make good decisions out there. With a quarterback, something you typically see the more experience they have is their ability to maneuver within the pocket. And that was one of Kyle McCord's biggest issues. I thought it was a strength after the Notre Dame game because he ended up doing that pretty well in that last drive. However, as the season went on, I mean, I'm thinking about like the Purdue game where there were some throws where he was just throwing right off of his back foot. And it was like, obviously I don't need to go on and on. I'm sure Ohio State fans have, said all their things they don't like about Kyle McCord, but that's an aspect of Will Howard. I keep wanting to call him Walker Howard. It's not I think that's a SEC quarterback, but
played for West Virginia.
Okay, that's what it was.
No, Skylar Howard played for West Virginia. It'll come to Walker Howard. Yes,
was
LSU.
Yeah,
good call.
He's at Ole Miss now.
Ole Miss. He left 5-star LSU, then to Ole Miss. Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a huge thing that Will Howard can do is maneuver the pocket very well. He has a good sense of, where to go in the pocket and when to escape from the pocket. Now, do I think every time, it was perfect? No, but it was better than what I felt like I saw with Kyle McCord. Obviously, I didn't see him for an entire season, but if we can get somebody in there who's at least comfortable enough in the pocket that they can maneuver around and they're not throwing off their back foot so much, I think that'll be a huge plus for the passing game.
Do you enjoy the bullseye kind of seasons like this? And with Ohio State, it's every season to an extent, to a large extent, of course, but still this one seems a little bit more urgent because of what it's looked like the last 3 years, the last game of the season, and because of the transfer portal additions and there being so much expectation that they have to win this year. Do you enjoy that, or would you rather be lurking a little bit more?
I don't. Just because the entire season I'm saying to myself, they have to win every game and they have to win by 40 points. And maybe that's a me problem. Maybe that's so much not a problem with the game, but like the 2014 season, that to me was just the most perfect season ever. You had the adversity, you had the early loss where it's like, all right, well, hopefully it just doesn't turn into, what was it? The 2011, 2012. I can never remember the 6 and 7 season. Hopefully it doesn't turn into that kind of stuff. And then long behold, they go on and they have one of the craziest runs ever, beat Wisconsin 59-0 just to make it into the playoffs. And then from there, it's all history with everything they did. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I love when my expectations are low and they are exceeded. Very rarely as an Ohio State fan are my expectations lower than what happens, though. Typically my expectations are much higher, and I'm just hoping that my expectations are met this year, because I don't know if there's any way that anything could happen higher than my expectations.
I think we know what that is then.
Yeah. How about you? I mean, what do you prefer when I know you're like, doing the more kind of national stuff now, but, think back to when you were just rooting for Ohio State, or even now, like, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the high expectations and they're met, or do you kind of prefer like the low expectation seasons and let's see what we can make of it here?
Well, for most of my life, the low expectation seasons turned out to be kind of satisfying. I think of 1982, they lost 3 games in a row early. They went on a big winning streak. They finished 9-3, which doesn't sound that remarkable now. But when you're 2-3 and you win 7 straight, you beat Michigan, you win a bowl game, then it depends how you land versus where you came from. And then I think of seasons like in the 90s, 1993, 95, 96, with the big buildup, the undefeated record, then they lose to Michigan. And there was the anticipation and the buildup of all of that, and it comes crashing down at the end. So the Jim Tressel first season, that was only a 7-5 season, but they beat Michigan, and not much was expected. They didn't deliver much from a record standpoint, but they won that game. And because it was the dawning of an era, there was hope. So yeah, those scenarios a little bit different, and bring a little bit more of a smile to my face. Art Schleicher's last year at Ohio State in '81, they had an ugly, ugly season. Their pass defense was one of the 2 or 3 worst in the nation, which was unheard of at the time. And like they lost to Minnesota late 35-31, but they go into Michigan. They're a 10-point dog. It might as well have been 30. They just were given no chance, and they eke out a win in the bitter cold at Michigan and tie for a Big Ten title. And there was a lot of satisfaction to that because they were just this scrappy bunch. They could barely beat anyone by more than a touchdown, but they somehow, and Michigan was preseason #1 that year, somehow tied Michigan for a Big Ten title. I like those kind of years.
One thing that I've been doing this offseason is I've been posting. So Ohio State has the second most wins all time, or not all time, since 2005. Alabama, of course, has the most, but Ohio State has the highest winning percentage. So I did the math, I did the calculations, and I started on exactly 219 days from the start of the Ohio State season. So I'm posting highlights of every 219 games since 2005. I think right now I'm in 2008. I just posted Michigan State 2008. They won 45-7, I think.
45-7. Okay.
Yeah. But the game before that was Purdue, when they only won, what was it, like 20-17 or something like that. And the only touchdown, or no, it was 19-7 or something like that. But the only touchdown in the game was a punt block. Malcolm Jenkins blocks the punt, and what's his name? It was kind of a weird name, Sanjay or something like that. I can't remember, but he recovers the punt and then takes it into the touch. That's the only touchdown of the entire game. And like, I'm thinking back to, like, you know, what were fans probably thinking back then? They're probably thinking, oh, we're just glad we got the win. You know, thank goodness the defense is good. We've got freshman Terrell Pryor in there. Nowadays, could you imagine, Mark, the vitriol if Ohio State won a game against Purdue 16-7, and the only touchdown was a punt block, and the quarterback threw for less than 100 yards, and the running back rushed for less? Like, I look back at that, I'm like, I'm just glad that that's not happening today, because I think Ohio State Twitter might blow up, and everybody would just say fire everybody at that point.
Oh yeah, it's just another world. They had a game that you'll get to here real soon, but you remember, I'm sure, they had a game against Illinois in that awful 6-7 season where they beat Illinois like 14-0 or 14-7. I think it was 14-0.
Yeah.
And they completed 2 passes. They went, it was Bosserman and Braxton Miller. I forget how much either one of them played, but Jake Stoneburner, the tight end, caught 2 touchdown passes. Those were the only 2 passes they completed in the game. You know, they had a game, this is going way back, 1991, before your time. They had a game they played at Illinois, and they had Joey Galloway at wide receiver. They had 3 NFL wide receivers, 3 good NFL wide receivers, even besides Galloway and Jeff Graham and Bobby Olive and Brian Stabline, 4 NFL wide receivers. They had an NFL quarterback in Jeff George, or not Jeff George, Illinois. Jeff Graham. Or Kent Graham. I'll get it. Kent Graham was the starting quarterback for Ohio State. They threw 0 passes in the first half. None. They did not throw the ball in the first half. So just crazy stuff.
Really going after what Michigan did against Penn State this year, huh? I guess this was in the second half. So,
except it didn't work out because they lost.
Yeah.
there was a comment made by a couple people in our Buckeyes chat yesterday about the rivalry and that it was good for Michigan to win. Is there any universe in which
Michigan win and good are never in the same sentence for me.
I agree.
I listen, I hold no vitriol toward Michigan fans. Like, I don't want to be one of those guys that just like every Michigan fan I try to be kind to Michigan fans, and I try to, converse with them. However, at times there are some that just refuse to do so, and that's fine. It is what it is. I just don't really converse with them. John Diadamo's in the chat. He's one of my ones that I like to converse with because I think he's fair and I think he does a good job of talking things out. So I appreciate him, but when it comes down to it, like, I've forgotten your question. I got off on that tangent about Michigan fans. Oh, the good for the rivalry.
Yeah.
I don't really care what's good and what's bad for the rivalry. I would just like to see Ohio State win every single game. And I'm a firm believer that, like, it doesn't matter what the national media or whatever people say. Like, it's whatever's important to you. Like, as long as the rivalry still means something to you, I couldn't care what some 18-year-old Ohio State fan thinks. Good for them, whatever they think. But to me, the rivalry still means something really, really big, even if Ohio State has won 8 in a row. Now, Ohio State's lost 3 in a row, so it obviously has kind of, made a resurgence. But to me, winning that game still meant just as much when we were winning 8 in a row than when we were losing 3 in a row.
Or if anyone has that take, and if Mike 3883 is in the chat, Mike, I am not picking on you. You're a great supporter. You're here all the time. But Mike brought that up, and a few other people joined in. And I actually brought up that when this was right when I started at ESPN, I had a guy training me from Michigan, huge Michigan fan. And that was right after the Jim Tressel win that we just talked about to start off his career. And this guy was one of the biggest Michigan fans I've ever met. And he actually said, it's good for the rivalry. You guys can. Now, he had no idea what was going to happen for the next 17 or 18 years, that he just thought, oh, we'll let you win 1 year. It's good for the rivalry. Anybody who says that, look at the 118 years, whatever the number is at this point. I know it was 100 years in 2003. Look at the length of this. Everything's good for the rivalry is going to withstand whatever, whoever's winning. It doesn't matter. It's going to be the greatest rivalry in college football, regardless. So it doesn't need any help. My response to that was, give me 2008, 2009, 10, when they were just 3-4 score wins. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think and this word is so overused, and it's used in negative connotation on social media, and that's fine. To me, saying like, oh, well, it's good for the rivalry, that's almost kind of like, somebody coping with the fact that your team just lost. And that's fine. We all cope with stuff, but at the end of the day, like, you're just trying to find some kind of positive for your team just lost in the rivalry. And at the end of the day, nobody wants to see their team lose in it. And when it comes down to it, if you lived through the Cooper years, which thankfully I was alive, but I was, in grade school, so I wasn't really paying attention all that much. I started paying attention to Ohio State football more when, Jim Tressel came along. So that's kind of all I've really known. Like, I knew of the Cooper years, but I didn't live through them. And so for me now, like, I look at, the Cooper years, and I hear people talk about them, and I say, man, I never, ever want to go back to those years. But if Ryan Day can't get it figured out, I mean, we're living in them. Some might argue we're living in them right now again. And, I don't like it. I'll still root for the Buckeyes, but at the end of the day, just let the Buckeyes win every single year, and I'll be A-okay.
I would argue that if this continues, and I know you don't want to hear that, but if this continues, this will be unlike anything in college football history, because John Cooper, he had 3 teams that lost enormous games to Michigan, but he was not riding a wave of being a top 5 team just every year. And for Ohio State to still be considered one of the very elite programs, but to lose, boom, 1 game, in excruciating fashion here, which in any fashion is excruciating. It just is. The only thing I can liken it to was Tom Osborne couldn't get through Oklahoma for a long time, and he had a ridiculous record. He won almost every other game, couldn't get through Oklahoma for years, and finally did and broke through and won national championships. But otherwise, people talk about firing Ryan Day. He would have the best winning percentage of any coach who's ever been fired in history. I can just about guarantee that. Last question for you, JR.
Mm-hmm.
And again, folks, Big Ten Huddle.
Yep.
And that's on Twitter, on X.
Twitter and YouTube. Yep.
Oh, it's on YouTube as well, in addition to the Big Ten show. Yep. Okay, I'm shortchanging JR. Join JR and the guys. That's Justin and Sonny. They're on the Big Ten show. It's right here on YouTube. Also, Big Ten Huddle right here on YouTube as well. Okay. There is a certain portion of the Ohio State fan base that thinks that, going off of what we were just talking about with Ryan Day, that Urban Meyer can do no wrong. Like, he did nothing wrong. He was perfect against Michigan. He won a national title, could have won other ones, but had this sterling record. He could do no wrong. There are others who are a little bit more reasonable about the situation and say some things broke right for him. Michigan wasn't at its peak. A lot of things happened there. How do you size up the Urban Meyer run?
He won a national championship, and regardless of how good Michigan was, he never lost to him. And to me, like, even with all the other stuff going on around it, I don't like the other stuff that going on around it. I don't like the 31-0 Clemson loss. I don't like, a number of things that happened at the end and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think if you have that record of multiple wins against your arch rival and 0 losses, and you won a national championship, you're going to be remembered as one of the best coaches, if not the best in the history of Ohio State football. I personally hold Urban Meyer in very high regard, not just because of that, but I think that he changed the program in such a way where he started recruiting not just in Ohio. Like, that was one of Jim Tressel's things where people were unhappy because he recruited mostly, if not pretty much all, in Ohio. Now he got outside of Ohio from time to time, but, he really wanted to, secure that Ohio talent before anything else. And when Urban Meyer came, he did secure that Ohio talent, and he went out to Texas, to Florida, to all these other places. He expanded the facilities on campus for Ohio State. I think some have said that, he made Ohio State football more important to the school overall when he got there. And, some of that stuff I think gets lost a little bit. Now, you talking to some people behind the scenes, maybe he didn't do it the best way possible because, some people really didn't like him, which, when you're somebody who goes in and you just demand everything, I don't think you're going to be very well liked, but it is what it is. So I look at it and I say the record is great. The national championship is great. What he did for the program is great. I know there's some messy stuff behind the scenes, so I probably wouldn't name him, greatest coach in Ohio State history, but I'll always hold what happened in high esteem. Not sure I hold him in high esteem, but I'll hold what happened at Ohio State under his head coaching tenure in high esteem, because if I think back to it, it really was one of the most fun times to be an Ohio State fan, other than a few, Iowa, Purdue, Clemson loss, stuff like that.
When you only lose 9 games in 7 years, then those losses stand out because you're not losing. And yes, Purdue kept them from a playoff spot. Iowa kept them from a playoff spot. The 2015 Michigan State game, that might be the worst of all, considering how talented that team was. And you made a mention of that Purdue game from 2008. I went to like a Northern Illinois game in 2015 that they only won because Darren Lee had a pick 6.
Oh,
yeah. Playing Northern Illinois, they won 20-13 or something. It was crazy. It's like, when are these guys going to wake up?
I mean, that is one of the things that you saw under Urban Meyer that you don't see under Ryan Day. And I think it's because of how much, kind of professionalism Ryan Day really forces his guys to have. I mean, there's been stories of like the players going into Urban Meyer's office and saying, Coach, we just can't take all the, stuff during the week. Like, we need a rest. We're playing on Saturday. Like, give us a little bit of time off. And, they typically, those conversations tend to coincide with some of those games where it was much closer than it should have been against much more inferior competition. And it's one of those things where you love the intensity that Urban Meyer brought, but how much did he really drain those players physically? But it's no surprise. Urban Meyer's an emotional guy. How much did he drain them emotionally as well? And like I said, some of the behind the scenes stuff, not always my favorite to think about. I don't know if I would have wanted to play under Urban Meyer. Sure, somebody can call me soft. That's fine. But Ryan Day seems like a more professional coach and somebody that the players like to play more with and interact with more. So I just hope he gets a national championship this year, so that way we can kind of put to bed some of this stuff and he can get the regards that I think he deserves.
And not to take away from the Iowa effort and Purdue, they were the better team. They took it to Ohio State. But when an entire 13-game season shows that one of the two teams is much better than the other one, and they get completely trounced on that, it's one thing if Ohio State and Michigan show up like they did in 2018 and they're both 10-1 and Ohio State drubs them. Okay, you can look at that. But the proof of the rest of the season is that one team is so much better. They're a top 3 or 4 team in the country, and the other team's like a top 40 team in the country. Then that game's all about that one team just not being emotionally, mentally ready, prepared. Something was completely amiss on those 2 nights.
Yeah, there was something going on behind the scenes those nights, because at the end of the day, Ohio State had the superior talent. Obviously not that day. The teams put it together, and talent's not everything. I mean, we've seen it the past 3 years. Ohio State is arguably a top 3 team in talent every single year, and they're dropping games to Michigan and to Missouri. That's another one that's kind of on the Clemson level. I don't want to think about. Obviously there's some excuses there because it wasn't a playoff game, but I'd prefer not to think about that one at all. But you're right. I mean, there's just something going on that the team who had the more talent just couldn't perform that day, and give it to teams like Iowa and Purdue. But give them credit because they did perform. Probably one of the best performances they've ever had, and they got the victory for it.
That's JR. You can catch him on our Ohio State channel, producing content there. We appreciate JR stopping by. And again, Big Ten Huddle and the Big Ten Show. That should be easy, Big Ten fans. You're on the Big Ten Show right here. You got Big Ten Show and you got the Big Ten Huddle right here on YouTube. Check out JR's work and our guys, Justin and Sonny as well. JR, appreciate you stopping by to talk the Buckeyes.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too. Again, that's JR producing content for us here at the Voice of College Football over on the Ohio State channel. And it looks like, was that Mike talking my language here? Man, I really need this computer to go on sale on Amazon. And use that Amazon link, Mike. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, let's Amazon get that on sale. Let's make it happen. All right, good stuff. 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific, USC call-in show. All right, I will let you guys go watch basketball or do whatever you're going to do. But again, it's Tim, it's Matt. They get together at 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific. I've got another coaches rankings coming out, numbers 50 up to 26. And position rankings here in the next few weeks. Give me a couple weeks to pull together position rankings across the country and in the Big Ten. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Please hit the like button on the way out, and we will see you next time.